The wind was howling at 25 miles per hour across the barren mountains of Afghanistan. At 9,000 meters away, a target smaller than a dinner plate waited in the crosshairs. The seasoned military observers shook their heads in disbelief. "Impossible," they whispered. "Even our best snipers wouldn't attempt that shot." But Staff Sergeant Maria Santos wasn't listening to the doubters. She had been underestimated her entire life, first as a woman in a male-dominated military, then as a small-town girl from Texas who dared to dream of joining the elite sniper corps. What happened next in those tense moments would not only save dozens of innocent lives but would rewrite the record books forever. This is the true story of one woman's incredible journey from a struggling single mother to becoming the most lethal female sniper in military history, and the impossible shot that left even the most elite marksman speechless. Maria Santos never imagined that her life would lead her to the mountains of Afghanistan, holding a rifle worth more than her childhood home. Growing up in the small town of Del Rio, Texas, she was just another kid trying to make sense of a world that seemed determined to keep her down. Her father, Carlos, worked double shifts at the local auto plant, his hands permanently stained with grease and his back bent from years of manual labor. Her mother, Elena, cleaned houses for wealthy families across town, scrubbing floors and washing dishes for people who barely acknowledged her existence. Despite their hard work, the Santos family lived paycheck to paycheck, constantly worried about keeping the lights on and food on the table. Maria was the youngest of 4 children and the only daughter. Her 3 older brothers had already chosen their paths. Miguel joined a local gang at 16, Roberto dropped out of school to work construction, and Diego managed to graduate but couldn't afford college. Everyone expected Maria to follow a similar route, maybe finish high school, find a job at the local diner or retail store, get married young, and start having children. But Maria had different plans, even if she couldn't quite put them into words yet. She was different from her classmates in ways that went beyond her family's financial struggles. While other girls her age were interested in makeup and boys, Maria found herself drawn to more unusual pursuits. She spent hours in the school library, reading everything from military history to physics textbooks. Her favorite subject wasn't English or art like many of her female peers, it was mathematics, specifically the complex calculations involved in ballistics and trajectory. This fascination began innocently enough. When Maria was 12, her uncle Ramon took her hunting for the first time. Ramon was a Vietnam veteran who rarely spoke about his service, but he had maintained his marksmanship skills over the years. He noticed something special about Maria almost immediately. While her brothers struggled to hit targets at 50 yards, Maria was consistently hitting bullseyes at twice the distance with an old bolt-action rifle that had seen better days. "Mija, you have a gift," Ramon told her that day, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. "I've seen grown men who've been hunting for decades who can't shoot like you just did." But gifts, Maria learned, weren't enough in a world that had predetermined expectations for girls like her. When she mentioned to her high school guidance counselor that she was interested in military service, specifically in roles that involved marksmanship, the woman looked at her with barely concealed pity. "Maria, honey, you should think about more realistic career options," the counselor said, shuffling through pamphlets for community colleges and local technical schools. "The military can be very difficult for young women, especially those from your background. Maybe consider nursing or teaching? Those are stable careers where you can really help people." The dismissal stung, but it also fueled something fierce inside Maria. She began researching military careers on her own, using the library's computer after school since her family couldn't afford internet at home. She learned about different branches of service, various military occupational specialties, and, most importantly, she discovered that women were increasingly being accepted into combat roles that had previously been closed to them. Everything changed during her senior year when a military recruiter visited her school. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh was a compact woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She spoke to the assembled students about opportunities in the Army, focusing on education benefits, technical training, and the chance to see the world. But what caught Maria's attention wasn't the standard recruitment speech, it was something Staff Sergeant Walsh said during the question and answer session. A male student asked, somewhat mockingly, whether women could really handle combat roles. Instead of getting defensive, Walsh smiled and shared a story about female snipers who had served with distinction in Iraq and Afghanistan. She talked about precision, patience, and mental toughness, qualities that had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with character and training. After the presentation, Maria approached the recruiter with trembling hands but a steady voice. "Staff Sergeant Walsh, I'm interested in learning more about sniper training and marksmanship programs." Walsh studied Maria carefully, taking in her earnest expression and the way she stood with unconscious military bearing despite having no formal training. "What's your experience with firearms, Santos?" "I've been hunting with my uncle since I was 12, Maria replied. "He says I have natural ability, but I know that's just the starting point. I want to learn everything I can about precision shooting and military tactics." Instead of discouraging her like the guidance counselor had, Walsh nodded approvingly. "Natural ability is important, but you're right that it's just the foundation. Military marksmanship is a completely different level of precision and pressure. Are you prepared for the physical and mental demands of that kind of training?" Maria didn't hesitate. "Yes, ma'am. I've been preparing my whole life, even if I didn't know it." Walsh handed her a business card and a packet of information. "Take this home, read everything carefully, and talk to your family. If you're serious about this path, we can discuss the steps you'll need to take." That night, Maria spread the military literature across her bed and read every word. She learned about the Army Sniper School, the rigorous selection process, and the kind of training that transformed ordinary soldiers into elite marksmen. She also read about the sacrifices required, months away from family, dangerous deployments, and the psychological weight of life and death decisions. When she tried to discuss her plans with her parents, their reactions were exactly what she expected. Her mother cried and begged her to reconsider, worried about the dangers her daughter would face. Her father was more stoic but equally concerned. "Mija, the military is no place for a young woman," Carlos said, his voice heavy with worry. "There are other ways to get an education, other ways to make a good life. You don't have to put yourself in harm's way." But Maria had made up her mind. She explained to her parents how military service would provide her with training, education benefits, and opportunities that simply weren't available to someone in her circumstances. More importantly, she tried to help them understand that this wasn't just about escaping their small town, it was about finding a purpose that matched her unique talents. The conversation that finally convinced them came from an unexpected source. Uncle Ramon, who had been quietly listening to the family's debates, finally spoke up during Sunday dinner. "You know," he said slowly, setting down his fork, "I spent 3 tours in Vietnam, and I met a lot of soldiers. The best ones weren't necessarily the biggest or the strongest. They were the ones who could think under pressure, who had steady hands and steady hearts. Maria has those qualities." He turned to look at his niece directly. "If this is really what you want, Mija, then you have my support. But understand that once you start down this path, there's no turning back. The military will test you in ways you can't imagine, and you'll have to prove yourself every single day." Maria's enlistment process began 3 months before graduation. She scored exceptionally well on the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, particularly in the mechanical and mathematical sections. When Staff Sergeant Walsh reviewed her scores, she pulled Maria aside for a private conversation. "Santos, your test results are impressive, especially in areas that relate to ballistics and precision shooting. I want you to know that if you perform well in basic training and advanced individual training, you could be eligible for specialized schools that most soldiers never get the chance to attend." The months between graduation and shipping out to basic training were filled with preparation. Maria followed a strict physical fitness regimen, studying everything she could about military protocol and tactics. She also spent more time at the shooting range with Uncle Ramon, who pushed her to improve her accuracy and consistency. "The fundamentals never change," Ramon told her during one of their practice sessions. "Breath control, sight alignment, trigger squeeze. Master these basics, and you'll have a foundation for everything else they teach you." Maria's departure for basic training at Fort Benning was emotional but determined. Her entire family gathered at the bus station, tears mixing with pride as they said their goodbyes. Her mother pressed a small silver cross into her hand, while her father gave her a fierce hug and whispered, "Make us proud, Mija." As the bus pulled away from Del Rio, Maria watched her hometown disappear in the distance. She was leaving behind everything familiar and comfortable, stepping into a world that had no guarantees and plenty of challenges. But, for the first time in her life, she felt like she was moving towards something rather than running away from it. Basic training was every bit as challenging as she had expected, but also exactly what she needed. The physical demands pushed her body to its limits, while the mental pressure taught her to function under stress. Her drill sergeants were tough but fair, and Maria quickly established herself as someone who could be counted on to meet every standard and exceed expectations whenever possible. It was during weapons training that Maria's natural abilities really began to shine. While other recruits struggled with marksmanship fundamentals, Maria was consistently scoring expert ratings with both rifle and pistol. Her shooting instructors noticed her performance and began pushing her to achieve even higher standards. "Santos, you've got the best natural shooting I've seen in 10 years of training recruits," Drill Sergeant Matthews told her after a particularly impressive performance on the range. "Have you given any thought to pursuing advanced marksmanship training?" Maria's response was immediate and confident. "Yes, Drill Sergeant. That's exactly what I want to do." The path from basic training to sniper school wasn't direct or easy. Maria first had to complete her advanced individual training as an infantryman, proving that she could handle the basic requirements of a combat soldier. Then, she had to volunteer for additional schools and training that would make her eligible for specialized roles. Each step of the process was competitive, with far more volunteers than available slots. Maria found herself competing against soldiers who had years more experience, many of whom initially dismissed her as just another recruit trying to prove something. But her performance on the range and in tactical exercises gradually earned their respect. The selection process for sniper school was particularly grueling. Candidates had to demonstrate not just marksmanship ability, but also physical fitness, mental toughness, and the capacity to work effectively under extreme pressure. The psychological evaluations were especially thorough, designed to identify soldiers who could handle the unique stresses of being a sniper. When Maria received word that she had been accepted to the U.S. Army Sniper School, she was standing in formation at Fort Bragg during a training exercise. The notification came through her squad leader, who pulled her aside after the day's activities. "Santos, you've got new orders," he said, handing her an official document. "Congratulations. You're heading to sniper school. Don't screw this up, opportunities like this don't come around often." That night, Maria called her family from a payphone outside the barracks. Her mother's voice was filled with worry and pride in equal measure, while her father struggled to find words for how he felt about his daughter's achievement. Uncle Ramon's reaction was the most meaningful to her. "Mija, you're about to learn things that most people can't even imagine. Remember that with great skill comes great responsibility. Every shot you take, every mission you complete, carries weight. Use your gifts wisely." As Maria prepared for the next phase of her journey, she reflected on how far she had come from that small town in Texas. The girl who had been told to lower her expectations was now preparing to attend one of the most elite training programs in the military. But she also knew that the real challenges lay ahead, and that proving herself once was just the beginning of a much longer journey. The U.S. Army Sniper School at Fort Benning was a world unlike anything Maria had experienced, even after months of military training. The facility itself was unremarkable from the outside, a collection of low buildings surrounded by vast training ranges that stretched to the horizon. But what happened within those buildings would either transform promising soldiers into elite marksmen or send them back to their units with broken dreams and wounded pride. Maria arrived on a humid Georgia morning in late spring, carrying everything she owned in a single duffel bag. She was one of 32 candidates selected for the 10-week course, and, as she looked around at her fellow students, the reality of her situation became crystal clear. She was not just the youngest member of the class, she was the only woman. The other candidates were seasoned soldiers, many with multiple deployments and years of combat experience. They carried themselves with the confident bearing of men who had proven themselves under fire, and their conversations were filled with references to battles and operations that Maria had only read about in military publications. She could feel their eyes on her as she checked in with the cadre, their expressions ranging from curious to openly skeptical. Master Sergeant David Rodriguez was the senior instructor, a man whose reputation in the sniper community was legendary. He had over 200 confirmed kills across 3 combat deployments and was known for his exacting standards and complete intolerance for anything less than perfection. When he addressed the class for the first time, his message was characteristically blunt. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned respect through blood and sacrifice, "you are here because someone thinks you might have what it takes to become a sniper. I'm here to prove them wrong. Over the next 10 weeks, I will push you beyond your limits and test every assumption you have about yourself and your abilities." His eyes swept across the assembled candidates, lingering for a moment on Maria before continuing. 32 of you walked through that door. If 6 of you graduate, I'll consider this course a success. The standards here are not negotiable, and they are not adjusted for anyone or any reason. You will meet them, or you will fail. The first week was designed to establish baseline capabilities and weed out candidates who clearly weren't ready for the program. Physical fitness tests, basic marksmanship evaluations, and academic assessments covered everything from ballistics calculations to field craft fundamentals. Maria approached each challenge with methodical determination, aware that every performance was being closely scrutinized. Her first real test came on the shooting range during the marksmanship assessment. Each candidate was required to engage targets at various distances using different weapons systems, with scoring standards that left no room for mediocrity. Maria stepped up to the firing line with her assigned M24 sniper weapon system, a rifle that felt different from anything she had used before, heavier, more precise, and somehow more serious than the hunting rifles of her youth. The range was completely silent as she settled into position. 200 yards away, a target the size of a paper plate waited in the morning crosswind. Maria went through her pre-shot routine methodically, the fundamentals that Uncle Ramon had drilled into her combining with the technical training she had received over the past year. Breath control. Sight alignment. Natural point of aim. Trigger squeeze. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and, through the scope, she watched the bullet impact dead center of the target. The next 4 shots formed a tight cluster around the first, creating a group that measured less than 2 inches across. When she moved back to engage targets at greater distances, her performance remained consistently exceptional. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached her position after she completed the string of fire. His expression was unreadable as he examined her target through a spotting scope, but, when he looked up, there was something different in his eyes. "Santos, where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My uncle taught me the basics when I was young, Master Sergeant," Maria replied, maintaining the respectful military bearing she had learned in basic training. "Everything else I've picked up through practice and the training I've received in the army." Rodriguez nodded slowly, making notes on his evaluation sheet. "Your fundamentals are solid, and your consistency is impressive. But understand that what you just demonstrated is barely the entry level for this course. Real sniper work involves factors you haven't even considered yet: environmental conditions, moving targets, extreme distances, and split-second decisions that can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure." Over the following days, Maria began to understand what he meant. The academic portion of the course was overwhelming in its complexity. Students were required to master advanced ballistics calculations, learn to read wind patterns and environmental factors, study enemy tactics and behavior patterns, and develop the observation skills necessary to gather intelligence in hostile territory. The mathematical components played to Maria's strengths. While other students struggled with the complex formulas needed to calculate bullet trajectory over long distances, she found herself helping classmates work through problems that seemed intuitive to her. But other aspects of the training challenged her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Fieldcraft training was particularly demanding. Students spent days learning to move undetected through various terrains, construct concealed positions, and maintain surveillance for extended periods. The ghillie suit construction exercise pushed everyone to their limits, creating camouflage clothing that would allow them to blend seamlessly with their environment while remaining functional enough for tactical movement. Maria's slight build, which had sometimes been a disadvantage in previous military training, proved to be an asset in fieldcraft exercises. She could move through vegetation and terrain features with less disturbance than larger students, and her natural attention to detail served her well when constructing hides and observation positions. But it was during the stalking exercises that she truly began to separate herself from the pack. These training scenarios required students to move undetected across open terrain to reach observation points or engage targets, all while being observed by experienced instructors who knew exactly what to look for. The first stalking exercise took place in a rolling meadow dotted with small trees and patches of scrub brush. Each student was assigned a target to observe from a position approximately 1,000 meters away, and they had 4 hours to reach their designated spot and identify specific details about their assigned target without being detected. Maria spent the first 30 minutes studying the terrain through binoculars, identifying potential routes and concealment opportunities. While some of her classmates began moving immediately, she took the time to plan her approach carefully, considering factors like sun position, wind direction, and likely observation points used by the evaluating instructors. Her movement was deliberate and patient. She covered ground in short rushes, freezing completely whenever she suspected she might be under observation. Her ghillie suit, which she had spent hours perfecting, helped her blend with the natural vegetation, but, more importantly, she had learned to move in ways that didn't disturb the environment around her. 3 hours into the exercise, Maria reached her assigned observation point undetected. From her concealed position, she was able to identify all the required details about her target and transmit the information back to the instructors via radio. When the exercise concluded and all students were recalled, she learned that she was one of only 4 candidates who had successfully completed the mission without being spotted. Master Sergeant Rodriguez gathered the class after the exercise for a detailed debrief. He went through each student's performance, identifying mistakes and offering guidance for improvement. When he reached Maria's performance, his tone was noticeably different. Santos demonstrated textbook fieldcraft during this exercise, he told the assembled class. Her movement was patient and deliberate, her concealment was effective, and she accomplished the mission without compromising her position. This is the standard all of you should be striving to meet. The acknowledgement felt good, but Maria could sense the mixed reactions from her classmates. Some were genuinely impressed and began seeking her advice on fieldcraft techniques. Others seemed resentful that the only woman in the class was outperforming them in areas they considered their strengths. The tension came to a head during the 4th week of the course, when students were divided into pairs for buddy team exercises. Maria was partnered with Sergeant First Class Mike Thompson, a veteran of 2 deployments to Iraq who had made it clear from the beginning that he didn't think women belonged in combat roles. Their first joint exercise required them to establish an observation post and maintain surveillance on a simulated enemy position for 24 hours. The mission would test not just their technical skills, but their ability to work together under stress and maintain focus during extended periods of inactivity. Thompson made his feelings known as soon as they were assigned as partners. "Look, Santos, I don't have anything personal against you, but this isn't the place for social experiments. Sniper teams depend on absolute trust and compatibility. I need to know that my partner can handle the pressure when bullets start flying." Maria's response was measured but firm. "Sergeant Thompson, I understand your concerns, but I'm here for the same reason you are, to become the best sniper I can be. Judge me on my performance, not on your assumptions about what I can or can't do." The observation post exercise began at dawn on a Monday morning. Maria and Thompson moved to their assigned position under cover of darkness, carrying everything they would need for the 24-hour surveillance mission. The position required them to remain undetected while observing a mock enemy camp 800 meters away, recording all activity and reporting significant developments to headquarters. Setting up the observation post required careful coordination between the 2 soldiers. They had to create concealed fighting positions, establish communication protocols, and organize their equipment for extended operations. Despite the personal tension between them, both soldiers approached the task professionally. The first 12 hours passed without major incident. Maria and Thompson took turns on observation duty, carefully documenting the scripted activities taking place at the simulated enemy position. The instructors had created a realistic scenario with role players moving through the camp, vehicles arriving and departing, and various activities that required careful analysis and reporting. It was during the second night, when fatigue was beginning to affect both soldiers, that the real test began. The instructors initiated a series of unexpected developments designed to test the students' ability to maintain focus and make critical decisions under pressure. First, role players began moving toward their observation post, simulating an enemy patrol that might discover their position. Maria spotted the movement first through her night vision scope and quietly alerted Thompson. Together, they had to decide whether to continue the mission, relocate their position, or call for extraction. Maria's assessment was quick and accurate. 3 personnel moving along the ridgeline, approximately 600 meters out. Current trajectory will bring them within 100 meters of our position in about 20 minutes. We need to adjust our concealment and prepare for potential compromise. Thompson, despite his earlier skepticism, found himself impressed by Maria's calm analysis of the situation. They worked together to improve their camouflage and prepare contingency plans for different scenarios. When the simulated patrol passed within 50 meters of their position without detecting them, both soldiers felt a sense of shared accomplishment. The second test came in the form of a high-value target who appeared briefly at the enemy position. Students were required to identify the individual, assess his importance to enemy operations, and recommend appropriate action. The window for observation was extremely brief, and the lighting conditions were challenging. Maria was on the spotting scope when the target appeared. She immediately recognized that this was the scenario they had been briefed to watch for, and she began gathering as much information as possible about the individual's appearance, behavior, and interactions with other personnel. High-value target confirmed, she whispered to Thompson, who was monitoring radio communications. Male, approximately 45 years old, wearing civilian clothing but carrying himself like military personnel. He's being treated with deference by the other role players, and he appears to be receiving briefings about camp security. Thompson quickly transmitted the information to headquarters while Maria continued her observations. The target was only visible for about 90 seconds before disappearing into a building, but Maria was able to gather enough details to provide a comprehensive report. When the exercise concluded the following morning, both soldiers were exhausted but satisfied with their performance. They had successfully maintained surveillance for 24 hours, responded appropriately to simulated threats, and provided accurate intelligence about enemy activities. Master Sergeant Rodriguez conducted their debrief privately, reviewing their performance and discussing areas for improvement. His assessment was positive, but he also used the opportunity to address the dynamics between the two partners. Thompson, you came into this exercise with preconceived notions about your partner's capabilities. Santos, you had to prove yourself in ways that your male counterparts don't face. Both of you need to understand that in real combat situations, personal prejudices and social dynamics can get people killed. He looked directly at Thompson. Your partner demonstrated exceptional observation skills, maintained composure under pressure, and contributed significantly to mission success. Those are the only factors that matter in this business. Then, he turned to Maria. Santos, you've proven you can perform at the required level, but you can't let the extra pressure of being the only woman in the class affect your focus. Your job is to be the best sniper you can be, not to prove points about gender equality. The conversation marked a turning point in Maria's relationship with her classmates. Thompson became one of her strongest supporters, and other students began to judge her performance on its merits rather than viewing her as an outsider trying to prove a point. But the academic and practical challenges of sniper school were relentless. Advanced ballistics instruction required students to master calculations that accounted for dozens of variables: air density, humidity, wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes, Coriolis effect, and the specific ballistic characteristics of different ammunition types. Maria excelled in these technical subjects, often finishing complex problem sets while other students were still working through the basic concepts. Her mathematical background served her well, but she also discovered an intuitive understanding of the physics involved in long-range shooting that went beyond mere calculation. During one particularly challenging ballistics exercise, students were required to engage targets at 1,200 meters under varying wind conditions. The scenario required them to observe wind patterns, calculate the necessary adjustments, and make first-round hits on targets that simulated enemy personnel. The wind was gusting and changing direction frequently, creating conditions that challenged even the experienced shooters in the class. Several students missed their targets completely, while others required multiple shots to achieve hits. When Maria's turn came, she spent several minutes studying the wind patterns across the range. She watched the vegetation movement at different distances, observed the mirage patterns through her scope, and even considered the thermal effects of the afternoon sun on air density. Her calculations filled an entire page of notes, but when she finally took her shot, the bullet struck the target dead center. The instructor's reaction was immediate and positive. Outstanding shooting, Santos. Walk us through your wind calculation and explain how you arrived at your adjustment. Maria's explanation demonstrated not just mathematical precision, but a deep understanding of the environmental factors that affect bullet flight. She had accounted for variables that some of her classmates hadn't even considered, and her systematic approach to the problem impressed both instructors and fellow students. As the course progressed, Maria continued to excel in both academic and practical exercises. Her shooting scores consistently ranked at the top of the class, her fieldcraft skills were exemplary, and her analytical abilities made her a valuable team member in group exercises. But, perhaps most importantly, she had earned the respect of her instructors and classmates through consistent performance rather than special treatment. When conflicts arose or challenges seemed overwhelming, she addressed them with the same methodical determination that characterized all her military training. The final weeks of sniper school included the most challenging exercises of the entire course. Students were required to plan and execute complex stalking missions, engage targets at extreme ranges, and demonstrate their ability to operate independently in hostile territory. The culminating exercise was a 5-day field problem that tested every skill students had learned over the previous 2 months. Working in two-person teams, they had to infiltrate a large training area, establish multiple observation posts, gather intelligence on simulated enemy activities, and engage specific targets while avoiding detection by aggressive counter-sniper teams. Maria was partnered with Sergeant Jake Miller, a quiet professional who had gradually become one of her closest allies in the class. Miller was an excellent shot and skilled fieldcraft practitioner, but he lacked Maria's analytical abilities and mathematical precision. Their partnership proved to be highly effective. Maria's planning and calculation skills complemented Miller's tactical experience and natural leadership abilities. Together, they developed mission plans that were both technically sound and practically achievable. The 5-day exercise pushed both soldiers to their limits. They moved primarily at night, carried everything they needed on their backs, and operated with minimal sleep while maintaining constant vigilance for enemy activity. The scenarios were designed to simulate the stress and complexity of real combat operations. On the 3rd day of the exercise, Maria and Miller received a mission that would test their abilities under the most challenging conditions yet. They were assigned to eliminate a high-value target who would appear briefly at a fortified position 1,400 meters from their closest concealment. The shot would have to be made in a narrow window of opportunity, with no chance for follow-up if the first round missed. The mission required extensive planning and coordination. Maria spent hours calculating the ballistic solution for the shot, considering wind patterns, elevation differences, and the specific characteristics of their assigned rifle and ammunition. Miller focused on route planning and escape procedures, ensuring they could reach the firing position undetected and withdraw safely after the engagement. The actual execution of the mission demonstrated everything they had learned throughout the course. Moving through difficult terrain at night, they reached their firing position with hours to spare before the target was scheduled to appear. Maria prepared her rifle and confirmed her ballistic calculations while Miller established security and monitored radio communications. When the high-value target finally appeared, Maria had only seconds to acquire him in her scope and fire. The distance was extreme, the wind was tricky, and the pressure was intense. But, when she squeezed the trigger, her bullet flew true, striking the target with lethal precision. The successful engagement marked the end of their final field exercise and the completion of sniper school. When all students were recalled to the classroom for final evaluations, Maria learned that she had not only passed the course but had graduated at the top of her class. Master Sergeant Rodriguez delivered her final assessment in front of the assembled class. Private First Class Santos has demonstrated exceptional performance throughout this course. Her marksmanship scores rank among the highest I've seen in 15 years of instruction. More importantly, she has shown the mental toughness, analytical ability, and professional dedication that define elite snipers. He paused, looking directly at Maria before continuing. Santos, you came here facing skepticism and doubt from people who questioned whether you belonged in this program. You've answered those questions definitively through your performance. You are graduating as a qualified sniper, and you've earned the designation the same way every other graduate has, through skill, determination, and unwavering commitment to excellence. The graduation ceremony was a moment of pride for Maria, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter in her military career. She was now qualified for assignments that would put her skills to the test in real-world operations, where the stakes would be measured not in training scores but in lives saved or lost. Maria's first deployment to Afghanistan came 8 months after her graduation from sniper school. She was assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division's 1st Brigade Combat Team, deploying to Forward Operating Base Chapman in the volatile Khost province. The base sat in a valley surrounded by rugged mountains that provided perfect terrain for enemy observation and attack, making it one of the most dangerous assignments in the theater. The flight into Afghanistan was Maria's first time leaving North America, and, as the military transport aircraft descended through the thin mountain air, she pressed her face against the small window to get her first look at the country that would become her home for the next 15 months. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, endless stretches of brown earth broken by jagged mountain ranges that seemed to climb directly into the sky. Chapman was a study in controlled chaos. Thousands of soldiers, contractors, and support personnel moved constantly through the base, preparing for missions, returning from patrols, or simply trying to stay alive in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The sound of helicopter rotors was constant, punctuated by the occasional boom of indirect fire from enemy positions in the surrounding hills. Maria's new unit was a mix of seasoned combat veterans and younger soldiers experiencing their first deployment. Her squad leader was Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, a tough but fair soldier who had completed 3 previous deployments and understood the unique challenges of incorporating a sniper team into regular infantry operations. Santos, Williams told her during their first briefing, "I know you're qualified and I know you can shoot. But this isn't sniper school anymore. Out here, your job is to keep my soldiers alive and help us complete our missions. Everything else is secondary." The integration process was complicated by the fact that Maria was not just the only woman in her squad, but one of only a handful of female combat soldiers on the entire base. The attention was unwelcome and sometimes problematic, ranging from protective behavior that undermined her authority to occasional hostility from soldiers who still believed women didn't belong in combat roles. Her first operational mission came 3 weeks after arriving at Chapman. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy fighters were using a specific mountain pass to move weapons and personnel between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Maria's squad was tasked with establishing observation posts along the route and gathering intelligence about enemy movements. The mission required a 5-day patrol through extremely rugged terrain, carrying everything they would need for extended operations. Maria's equipment load was the same as every other soldier in the squad: rifle, ammunition, food, water, communications gear, and various mission essential items that together weighed nearly 90 pounds. The patrol began before dawn on a cold October morning. Moving through the mountains in tactical formation, the squad covered terrain that would have challenged experienced hikers under the best of circumstances. With full combat loads and the constant threat of enemy contact, every step was a test of endurance and determination. Maria's sniper rifle and associated equipment added significant weight to her load, but she was determined to keep pace with her squad mates without complaint. The high altitude made every breath a struggle, and the rocky terrain threatened to twist ankles or send soldiers tumbling down steep slopes. On the second day of the patrol, the squad established a temporary observation post on a ridgeline that offered excellent views of the suspected enemy route. Maria and her spotter, Corporal Danny Rodriguez, set up their position with careful attention to concealment and fields of fire. The intelligence reports proved accurate. Over the next 48 hours, the squad observed multiple groups of armed individuals moving through the valley below. Maria's job was to provide detailed observations about their numbers, equipment, and activities while being prepared to engage if the tactical situation required it. Her first real test came on the fourth day of the mission. A group of 8 enemy fighters appeared in the valley carrying what appeared to be heavy weapons systems. The distance to the target area was approximately 800 meters, well within Maria's engagement range, but the decision to open fire would have significant tactical implications. Staff Sergeant Williams had to consider multiple factors: the enemy's apparent capabilities, the squad's position and ability to withdraw if necessary, and the potential for civilian casualties in the area. After consulting with higher headquarters via radio, he made the decision to engage. "Santos, you have multiple military-age males with apparent heavy weapons systems at 800 meters, Williams said quietly. "You are cleared to engage the primary threats." Maria's heart rate immediately increased, but her training took over. She had practiced this scenario hundreds of times in training, but the knowledge that real lives hung in the balance added a weight that no simulation could replicate. Through her scope, she could see the enemy fighters clearly, studying their movements and selecting her primary targets. Her first shot struck the apparent leader of the group center mass, dropping him immediately. The other fighters scattered for cover, but Maria's elevated position and clear fields of fire allowed her to engage 2 additional targets before they could reach concealment. The remaining enemies withdrew rapidly, leaving behind the heavy weapons they had been carrying. The engagement lasted less than 2 minutes, but it marked a fundamental transformation in Maria's military experience. She was no longer a soldier in training or a promising candidate. She was a combat veteran who had engaged and eliminated enemy fighters in defense of American forces. The psychological impact of the engagement was significant, but Maria's training and mental preparation helped her process the experience without becoming overwhelmed. That evening, as the squad prepared to return to base, Staff Sergeant Williams pulled her aside for a private conversation. "Santos, you performed exactly like I hoped you would today," he said. "Your shots were accurate, your decision-making was sound, and you kept your composure under pressure. That's what I need from my sniper." The successful completion of her first combat mission established Maria's credibility within the unit, but it also marked the beginning of increasingly dangerous assignments. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces were becoming more sophisticated in their tactics, and American units were facing threats that required specialized responses. Maria's next major mission came 6 weeks later, when intelligence sources reported that a high-value target would be meeting with local commanders at a compound approximately 12 kilometers from the base. The target was believed to be a senior Taliban leader responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. The mission required a joint operation involving multiple units and sophisticated planning. Maria's role was to provide overwatch and precision engagement capabilities for an assault force that would attempt to capture the target alive. If capture proved impossible, she was authorized to eliminate the target to prevent his escape. The complexity of the operation was unlike anything Maria had experienced. The assault force would approach the compound under cover of darkness, supported by helicopter gunships and artillery if needed. Maria and her spotter would establish a concealed position approximately 1,200 meters from the target building, providing real-time intelligence about enemy activities and maintaining the ability to engage critical targets. The infiltration to their firing position required moving through territory that was known to be patrolled by enemy forces. Maria and Corporal Rodriguez moved cross-country for over 4 hours, navigating by GPS and night vision equipment while avoiding roads and established paths that might be monitored. Setting up their position required careful attention to both concealment and tactical considerations. They needed clear sight lines to the target compound while remaining invisible to enemy observers. The distance was at the extreme range for their equipment, and environmental factors like wind and temperature would significantly affect bullet trajectory. As dawn approached, Maria began making the detailed observations and calculations that would be critical if engagement became necessary. The compound was a traditional Afghan structure with high walls and multiple buildings, making it difficult to track personnel movement. Through her high-powered scope, she could see armed guards moving around the perimeter and various individuals entering and leaving the main building. The assault force began their approach as scheduled, moving in carefully coordinated bounds toward the compound. Maria provided real-time updates on enemy positions and activities, helping the ground commander adjust his plan based on current conditions. The situation began to deteriorate when the assault force was spotted by enemy sentries approximately 400 meters from the compound. Gunfire erupted immediately, and it became clear that a stealthy capture operation had become a full-scale firefight. "Overwatch, this is Ground Force Commander," came the urgent radio call. "We are taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Can you identify and engage enemy personnel on the compound walls?" Maria's response was immediate and professional. Through her scope, she could see muzzle flashes from several positions along the compound's perimeter walls. The range was challenging, and she had to carefully distinguish between enemy fighters and potentially innocent civilians who might be caught in the crossfire. Her first shot eliminated an enemy fighter who was firing an RPG at the advancing assault force. The second shot took out a machine gunner who was providing covering fire from the main building's roof. Each engagement required split-second decisions about target identification and the potential for collateral damage. The firefight continued for nearly an hour, with Maria providing continuous overwatch and precision engagement support. She eliminated 6 enemy fighters during the operation, each shot carefully planned and executed under extreme pressure. Her accuracy and judgment contributed significantly to the assault force's ability to reach and secure the compound. However, the primary target had escaped during the initial moments of the firefight, slipping away through routes that intelligence had failed to identify. While the operation was tactically successful in eliminating enemy fighters and disrupting their activities, the failure to capture the high-value target was a strategic disappointment. The after-action review was thorough and professional, examining every aspect of the operation to identify lessons learned and areas for improvement. Maria's performance received particular attention from both her immediate commanders and higher headquarters personnel who were evaluating her capabilities. Major Sarah Chen, the battalion intelligence officer, conducted a detailed debrief with Maria about her observations during the operation. "Santos, your target identification and engagement decisions were outstanding throughout this mission. You successfully engaged 6 enemy combatants without any civilian casualties or friendly fire incidents. That level of precision under combat conditions is exceptional." The Major paused, reviewing her notes before continuing. "I'm recommending you for advanced training opportunities that could significantly expand your operational capabilities. There are specialized programs designed for snipers with your demonstrated skills and judgment." Maria's reputation within the brigade continued to grow with each successful mission. She became the go-to sniper for operations requiring extreme precision or challenging environmental conditions. Her mathematical skills and analytical approach to complex shooting problems made her particularly valuable for missions involving long-range engagements or target-rich environments. But it was during a routine patrol 6 months into her deployment that Maria encountered the situation that would define her military career and establish her reputation as one of the most skilled snipers in the Army. The patrol was supposed to be a standard reconnaissance mission, gathering intelligence about enemy activities in a valley that had been relatively quiet for several weeks. Maria's squad was one of 3 elements moving through the area, with orders to observe and report rather than engage unless absolutely necessary. The morning started peacefully enough. The weather was clear, the terrain was manageable, and radio communications with headquarters were functioning normally. Maria and her spotter moved with the patrol column, scanning constantly for signs of enemy activity but finding nothing more threatening than local farmers working their fields. That changed dramatically when the lead element of the patrol triggered an improvised explosive device in what appeared to be a coordinated ambush. The explosion was followed immediately by intense small arms fire from concealed positions on both sides of the valley. Within seconds, a routine patrol had become a desperate fight for survival. The enemy had clearly planned the ambush carefully, positioning fighters to create overlapping fields of fire that trapped the patrol in a killing zone with limited options for escape or maneuver. The lead squad was pinned down by accurate fire, with several soldiers wounded and unable to move to safer positions. Staff Sergeant Williams immediately began coordinating the squad's response to the ambush, calling for medical evacuation helicopters and artillery support while trying to locate and suppress enemy positions. But the effectiveness of the enemy's concealment and the complexity of the terrain made it difficult to identify specific targets for engagement. "Santos, I need you to find me those firing positions," Williams shouted over the sound of gunfire. "My people are getting chewed up down there, and I can't maneuver until we suppress those guns." Maria and her spotter quickly moved to a position that offered better observation of the valley floor and surrounding hillsides. Through her scope, she began systematically scanning the terrain for muzzle flashes, movement, or other indicators of enemy positions. The task was complicated by the enemy's effective use of concealment and their discipline in controlling their rate of fire. Rather than spraying bullets wildly, they were firing carefully aimed shots from well-prepared positions, making them difficult to locate and engage. Maria's first priority was identifying the enemy positions that posed the greatest threat to wounded American soldiers. She located a machine gun position that was preventing medics from reaching casualties and engaged it with a carefully placed shot that eliminated the gunner. Her second shot disabled another fighter who was attempting to take over the machine gun. But even with Maria's precision engagement support, the tactical situation remained desperate. The enemy had positioned themselves to control all the natural escape routes from the valley, and it was becoming clear that the patrol was facing a much larger force than initially estimated. The turning point came when Maria identified what appeared to be a command element directing the enemy's activities from a position high on the valley's eastern slope. Through her scope, she could see several individuals with radio equipment and what appeared to be mapping materials, clearly coordinating the ambush. The distance to the enemy command position was approximately 1,400 meters, complicated by significant elevation differences and swirling wind patterns in the mountain valley. The shot would require every bit of Maria's technical skill and mental discipline, but eliminating the enemy leadership could disrupt their coordination enough to allow the patrol to break contact. Maria spent several precious minutes calculating the ballistic solution for the shot, considering wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes, air density effects from the elevation, and the specific characteristics of her rifle and ammunition. Her spotter provided distance and environmental information while monitoring radio communications about the deteriorating tactical situation. When Maria finally took the shot, she was confident in her calculations but aware that the margin for error was extremely small. The bullet flew for nearly 3 seconds before striking its target, eliminating what appeared to be the senior enemy commander and creating immediate confusion in the enemy ranks. The psychological impact of the long-range precision shot was immediate and significant. Enemy fire slackened noticeably as fighters struggled to understand how their concealed command position had been compromised. The disruption in their coordination allowed American forces to begin maneuvering out of the killing zone. Over the next hour, Maria continued to provide precision engagement support as the patrol fought its way to safer positions. She eliminated several additional enemy fighters and suppressed others, contributing significantly to the unit's ability to extract with minimal casualties. When the patrol finally reached friendly lines, the after-action assessment revealed the full scope of what they had faced. Intelligence analysis indicated that the ambush had involved over 40 enemy fighters in carefully prepared positions, representing one of the most sophisticated attacks the brigade had encountered. Maria's performance during the ambush became the subject of detailed analysis by both tactical commanders and training specialists. Her ability to identify and engage targets at extreme range under combat pressure had prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of American lives. The recognition came not just from her immediate chain of command, but from senior leaders throughout the theater of operations. Word of her exceptional marksmanship and tactical judgment spread quickly through military networks, establishing her reputation as an elite performer capable of extraordinary achievements under pressure. The intelligence briefing that would change Maria's life forever took place in a sterile conference room deep within the headquarters building at Bagram Airfield. She had been summoned from her forward operating base for what her commanders described only as a special assignment requiring her unique capabilities. The mysterious nature of the orders and the high level of security surrounding the briefing suggested something far beyond routine combat operations. Colonel James Mitchell, the task force commander, was a career special operations officer whose reputation for precision and innovative tactics was legendary throughout the Army. When he entered the briefing room, his presence immediately commanded attention from the assembled personnel, intelligence analysts, tactical planners, and a small group of specialized operators whose specific roles remained unclear. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Mitchell began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had planned and executed dozens of high-risk operations. "What I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. The mission we're discussing has the potential to significantly impact coalition operations throughout this theater." He gestured toward a large screen displaying satellite imagery of a remote mountain valley in eastern Afghanistan, near the Pakistan border. The terrain was some of the most challenging in the region: steep rocky slopes, narrow valleys, and peaks that rose over 4,000 meters above sea level. Intelligence sources have confirmed that a high-value target will be meeting with regional commanders at a fortified compound in this valley in approximately 72 hours. The target is Abdul Rahman Hakim, the operational commander responsible for coordinating major attacks against coalition forces throughout eastern Afghanistan. The screen changed to display detailed photographs and biographical information about Hakim. Maria studied the images carefully, noting the man's apparent age, physical characteristics, and the deferential behavior of other individuals in the photographs. Colonel Mitchell continued his briefing. Hakim has been directly responsible for planning attacks that have killed over 150 coalition personnel and hundreds of Afghan civilians. He's managed to avoid capture or elimination for over 3 years by maintaining strict operational security and using terrain that makes conventional military operations extremely difficult. The tactical challenges became clear as the briefing progressed. The compound was situated in a valley that provided natural protection from ground assault, surrounded by peaks that offered excellent observation and defensive positions for enemy forces. Previous attempts to reach the compound had been detected and repelled with significant casualties. The terrain makes helicopter insertion extremely risky due to altitude and weather conditions, the colonel explained. Ground approaches would require multi-day movements through territory controlled by hostile forces, with little chance of maintaining tactical surprise. Major Lisa Park, the intelligence officer, provided additional details about the target and the operational environment. Hakim will be at the compound for approximately 6 hours, meeting with commanders from 4 different regional cells. This represents the largest gathering of senior enemy leadership we've identified in over a year. She paused, looking directly at Maria before continuing. The compound is located approximately 2,800 meters from the nearest feasible observation position. Weather conditions are forecast to include variable winds and possible snow squalls. The engagement window will be extremely limited. Maria felt her pulse quicken as she began to understand why she had been summoned for this briefing. The distance was far beyond anything she had attempted in combat, requiring precision and calculation that pushed the absolute limits of current technology and human capability. Captain David Thompson, the tactical operations officer, outlined the proposed mission concept. "We're planning to insert a 2-person sniper team via helicopter during darkness, approximately 15 kilometers from the target compound. The team will move cross-country to establish a concealed position with line of sight to the target building." He gestured toward detailed topographical maps showing the proposed infiltration route. "The movement will require approximately 8 hours through extremely challenging terrain. Once in position, the team will have a window of approximately 4 hours to identify and engage the target." Colonel Mitchell took over the briefing again, his tone becoming more serious. "This mission represents the best opportunity we've had to eliminate a target who has caused significant casualties among coalition forces. However, the technical challenges are unprecedented. The engagement distance exceeds anything we've attempted in this theater, and environmental conditions will be extremely challenging." He looked directly at Maria. "Staff Sergeant Santos, your performance over the past 8 months has established you as one of the most capable precision marksmen in this theater. Your successful engagement of targets at extreme range, combined with your analytical approach to complex shooting problems, makes you the logical choice for this mission." Maria's response was immediate and professional. "Yes, sir. I understand the challenges and I'm prepared to accept the assignment." But Colonel Mitchell wasn't finished. "Understand that this mission involves significant personal risk beyond the normal dangers of combat operations. The insertion and extraction will be conducted in hostile territory with limited options for emergency support. Weather conditions could prevent helicopter extraction, leaving the sniper team to move cross-country to friendly lines. He paused, allowing the implications to sink in. Additionally, the shot itself will be at the absolute limit of current technology and human capability. Success will require perfect execution under extreme pressure, with no opportunity for follow-up shots. The detailed mission planning began immediately following the briefing. Maria worked closely with meteorologists to understand wind patterns and weather forecasts for the target area. Ballistics specialists provided detailed analysis of trajectory calculations for the extreme range engagement, while intelligence analysts refined information about the target compound and enemy capabilities. The selection of her spotter was critical to mission success. Sergeant First Class Kevin Martinez was a veteran of multiple deployments with extensive experience in long-range reconnaissance operations. His expertise in observation, navigation, and communications made him an ideal partner for such a challenging mission. Martinez had initially expressed skepticism about the mission parameters when he was briefed. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone attempt a shot at that distance under those conditions. Are we sure this is technically feasible?" Maria's response demonstrated both confidence and realistic assessment of the challenges. "Sergeant Martinez, the ballistics calculations indicate that success is possible with perfect execution and favorable conditions. It's at the absolute limit of what our equipment can do, but it's within the realm of possibility." She continued, spreading out detailed wind charts and topographical maps. "The key factors are precise range estimation, accurate wind calculation, and perfect timing. We'll have one opportunity to make this shot, and we need to be prepared for every variable we might encounter." The equipment selection process was exhaustive. Maria's primary weapon would be a specialized variant of the M2010 enhanced sniper rifle, modified with advanced optics and precision-manufactured ammunition specifically designed for extreme range engagements. Every component was tested and calibrated to ensure maximum accuracy. Her scope was a cutting-edge model with advanced range-finding capabilities and ballistic calculation features that would help account for the multiple variables affecting bullet flight over such extreme distances. The ammunition was match-grade, with each cartridge individually measured and tested to ensure consistency. The physical preparation was equally important. The infiltration route would require moving over 20 kilometers through mountainous terrain at altitudes exceeding 3,000 meters. Both Maria and Martinez spent weeks acclimatizing to high-altitude conditions and building the endurance necessary for such a demanding operation. Mental preparation involved detailed study of the target area, memorization of the compound layout, and rehearsal of various engagement scenarios. Maria practiced the specific shooting position she would use, considering the effects of altitude, temperature, and the extended prone position on her accuracy. The mission launch was scheduled for a moonless night that would provide maximum concealment during the infiltration. The helicopter insertion took place without incident, with Maria and Martinez being dropped at a predetermined coordinate approximately 15 kilometers from the target compound. The cross-country movement was everything the planners had predicted and worse. The terrain was a nightmare of loose rock, steep slopes, and hidden obstacles that threatened to cause injury or equipment damage. Both soldiers carried loads exceeding 80 pounds, including specialized equipment, extra ammunition, communications gear, and survival supplies for extended operations. Navigation was challenging despite GPS technology, as the mountains created signal interference and the need to avoid established trails forced them to move through unmapped terrain. Martinez's experience proved invaluable as he guided them around obstacles and selected routes that minimized exposure to potential observation. The altitude affected both soldiers significantly, despite their preparation. The thin air made every movement an effort, and the cold mountain environment required careful attention to preventing hypothermia and equipment failures. After 8 hours of continuous movement, they reached the designated observation point just as dawn was beginning to lighten the eastern horizon. The position offered an excellent view of the target compound 2,800 meters away, but establishing their height required careful work to ensure concealment from enemy observation. Maria's first view of the compound through her scope revealed the magnitude of the challenge ahead. The target building was clearly visible, but the extreme distance made individual identification extremely difficult. She would need to wait for optimal lighting conditions and use every available magnification to identify her target when he appeared. The wind conditions were variable and complex, as predicted by the meteorological forecasts. Air currents flowed differently at various altitudes between the observation point and the target, creating a three-dimensional puzzle that would require constant monitoring and adjustment. Martinez established communication with headquarters and confirmed their position and readiness to execute the mission. The response indicated that intelligence sources had confirmed the target's presence at the compound and estimated his appearance outside the building within the next 2 hours. Maria spent the waiting time making detailed observations of the compound and refining her ballistic calculations based on current conditions. The mathematics were staggering. She had to account for bullet drop over nearly 3 kilometers, wind effects at multiple altitudes, air density changes due to temperature and elevation, and even the rotation of the Earth itself. Her shooting position was a carefully prepared prone stance that allowed maximum stability while accommodating the extreme elevation angle required for the shot. Every aspect of her position was optimized for precision, from the placement of her rifle's bipod to the angle of her body relative to the target. The first sighting of potential targets came 2 hours after sunrise. Through her scope, Maria could see several individuals moving around the compound, but the distance made positive identification challenging. She had to wait for the right combination of lighting, target position, and environmental conditions. When Abdul Rahman Hakim finally appeared outside the target building, the identification was unmistakable. His physical characteristics matched the intelligence photographs exactly, and his behavior indicated that he was indeed the senior leader among the assembled personnel. But the window for engagement was extremely narrow. Hakim would only be exposed for a few minutes, and the shot had to be perfect on the first attempt. There would be no opportunity for range correction or follow-up shots. Maria's heart rate increased as she prepared for the shot, but her training allowed her to maintain the mental focus necessary for such precision work. She went through her pre-shot checklist methodically, confirming range, wind calculation, and rifle settings. The moment of truth came when Hakim stopped in an open area outside the main building, clearly silhouetted against the compound wall. Maria had a perfect view of her target, optimal lighting conditions, and a momentary lull in the wind patterns. Her breathing technique slowed as she prepared for the shot. Every aspect of her position was perfect, her scope was precisely aligned, and her ballistic calculations accounted for all identifiable variables. When she finally squeezed the trigger, she knew that she had executed the shot exactly as planned. The bullet flight time was nearly 4 seconds, during which Maria maintained her sight picture and watched through her scope. When the bullet struck its target, the effect was immediate and unmistakable. Abdul Rahman Hakim collapsed instantly, and the other individuals in the compound began running for cover. Martinez immediately confirmed the successful engagement to headquarters while Maria maintained observation of the compound. The psychological impact of the long-range precision shot was immediate. Enemy personnel were clearly confused and frightened by an attack that seemed to come from nowhere. The extraction was conducted as planned, with Maria and Martinez moving to a predetermined pickup point approximately 8 kilometers from their shooting position. The helicopter extraction was executed without incident, and they were back at headquarters within 6 hours of completing the mission. The post-mission analysis revealed the historic nature of Maria's achievement. The engagement distance of 2,800 meters was the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, exceeding previous records by several hundred meters. More importantly, the elimination of Abdul Rahman Hakim disrupted enemy operations throughout eastern Afghanistan and saved countless coalition and civilian lives. But, for Maria, the significance went beyond records or tactical achievements. She had proven that with proper training, preparation, and execution, even seemingly impossible challenges could be overcome. The shot that everyone said was impossible had become reality through skill, determination, and unwavering commitment to excellence. The recognition came from the highest levels of military and government leadership. Maria's achievement was studied by military academies and tactical schools as an example of precision and professional excellence under extreme pressure. But, perhaps more importantly, she had opened doors for future generations of women in combat roles, proving that capability and dedication mattered more than gender or physical size. The news of Maria's record-breaking shot traveled through military channels with unprecedented speed. Within 24 hours of the successful mission, reports were being analyzed at the Pentagon, studied by Special Operations Command, and discussed in classified briefings at the highest levels of government. The 2,800-meter engagement had not only eliminated a high-value target but had fundamentally changed perceptions about the capabilities of modern precision marksmanship. General Patricia Hayes, the first female four-star general in Army history, personally flew to Afghanistan to debrief Maria about the mission. The meeting took place in a secure conference room at Bagram Airfield, with only essential personnel present to maintain operational security while ensuring that every detail of the historic achievement was properly documented. Staff Sergeant Santos, General Hayes began, her tone reflecting both professional respect and personal pride. What you accomplished 3 days ago represents a watershed moment for military marksmanship and for women in combat roles. I want to understand not just how you made that shot, but what it means for the future of our armed forces. Maria's response was characteristically modest and professional. Ma'am, I was fortunate to have excellent training, outstanding equipment, and favorable conditions. The success of the mission was the result of teamwork and preparation, not individual heroics. But General Hayes pressed for more details, understanding that Maria's achievement had implications far beyond a single tactical success. Walk me through the actual engagement. Help me understand the technical challenges and how you overcame them. Maria spent the next hour providing a detailed breakdown of the mission, from the initial ballistic calculations to the final trigger squeeze. She explained how environmental factors had been analyzed and accounted for, how equipment limitations had been addressed, and how months of training and combat experience had prepared her for such an extreme challenge. The general was particularly interested in the psychological aspects of the shot. Sergeant Santos, you had one opportunity to make a perfect shot at a distance that had never been attempted in combat. How did you manage the pressure of knowing that mission success depended entirely on your performance? Maria's answer revealed the mental discipline that had made her success possible. Ma'am, I approached it the same way I approach every shot, by focusing on the technical fundamentals and trusting my training. The distance was unprecedented, but the basic principles of marksmanship remained the same. I had prepared for this kind of challenge throughout my military career. She continued, reflecting on the moment itself. When I was actually taking the shot, I wasn't thinking about records or history. I was focused on executing perfect technique and eliminating a target who had killed many of our people. The significance of what had happened didn't really hit me until after the mission was complete. General Hayes nodded, making notes for her report to senior leadership. Your achievement is going to be studied and analyzed for years to come. Military academies will teach courses about this engagement, and equipment manufacturers will use your success to develop even more capable systems. But the general's next comments addressed the broader implications of Maria's success. Perhaps more importantly, you've demonstrated that exceptional performance in combat has nothing to do with gender and everything to do with skill, preparation, and mental toughness. You've opened doors that will benefit women throughout the military for generations. The formal recognition process was swift and comprehensive. Maria was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action, one of the highest decorations for valor available to American soldiers. The citation specifically noted her extraordinary precision and composure under extreme pressure and the historic nature of her achievement in eliminating a high-value enemy target. But the military's response went beyond individual recognition. Maria's success prompted comprehensive reviews of sniper training programs, equipment procurement processes, and tactical employment of precision marksmen. Her techniques and analysis methods were incorporated into instruction at military schools throughout the armed forces. The publicity surrounding her achievement was carefully managed to balance recognition of her success with operational security requirements. While the general facts of her record-breaking shot were eventually declassified, specific details about tactics, techniques, and equipment remained protected to preserve military advantages. Media coverage was unprecedented for a military marksmanship story. Major news organizations around the world reported on Maria's achievement, focusing on both the technical aspects of the shot and the historic nature of a woman setting such a record. The coverage was generally positive, though it also generated debate about women in combat roles and the ethics of long-range warfare. Maria handled the media attention with the same professionalism she had shown throughout her military career. During carefully controlled interviews, she consistently emphasized the team nature of military operations and the importance of proper training and preparation. She deflected personal praise while highlighting the capabilities of American soldiers and the quality of military training programs. "I want people to understand that this achievement represents the culmination of years of training and the support of outstanding teammates," she told a reporter from Military Times. "No soldier succeeds alone, and this mission was successful because of the entire team of people who planned, supported, and executed it." The technical analysis of Maria's shot became the subject of intense study by ballistics experts, equipment manufacturers, and military researchers. The combination of extreme range, challenging environmental conditions, and perfect execution provided unprecedented data about the limits of human and technological capability. Dr. James Morrison, a ballistics specialist at Aberdeen Proving Ground, led the technical analysis team that examined every aspect of the engagement. Staff Sergeant Santos's achievement represents the practical application of theoretical ballistics at distances we had previously considered beyond human capability, he explained in his report. The analysis revealed that Maria's success had required accounting for dozens of variables that affect bullet flight over extreme distances. Wind effects at multiple altitudes, air density variations due to temperature and elevation, Earth's rotation, and even the specific ballistic characteristics of her individual rifle and ammunition had all been factored into her calculations. "What's most impressive," Dr. Morrison noted, "is that she performed these complex calculations under combat conditions and executed the shot perfectly on the first attempt. The margin for error at that distance was essentially zero, yet she achieved perfect shot placement." Equipment manufacturers were quick to capitalize on the publicity surrounding Maria's achievement. The rifle, scope, and ammunition manufacturers all highlighted their products' roles in the record-breaking shot, leading to increased interest in precision shooting equipment and long-range marksmanship training. But Maria was careful not to become overly involved in commercial endorsements or promotional activities. Her focus remained on her military duties and continuing to serve effectively as a sniper and squad leader. She understood that her achievement had value beyond personal recognition, but she was determined to maintain her professional focus. The impact on her unit was immediate and significant. Maria's success brought additional resources and attention to her brigade, including upgraded equipment, advanced training opportunities, and priority support for sniper operations. Her squad became a model for other units, with commanders throughout the theater seeking to understand and replicate their methods. Staff Sergeant Williams, her original squad leader who had first tested her in combat, was particularly proud of her development. "I knew Santos was special from the first time I saw her shoot," he told fellow non-commissioned officers. "But what makes her truly exceptional is her approach to every aspect of being a soldier. She studies, she prepares, and she never stops trying to improve." The psychological impact on enemy forces was significant and lasting. Intelligence reports indicated that Maria's long-range precision had created fear and uncertainty among enemy commanders, who could no longer assume that distance provided safety from American military capabilities. The propaganda value of the achievement also provided benefits for coalition morale and local population attitudes toward American forces. But perhaps the most important impact was on other women serving in combat roles. Maria's success provided concrete evidence that female soldiers could perform at the highest levels in the most demanding military occupational specialties. Her achievement became a rallying point for advocates of expanded opportunities for women in the armed forces. Lieutenant Sarah Chan, a female officer serving with a different unit in Afghanistan, described the impact of Maria's achievement on her own service. "Seeing what Staff Sergeant Santos accomplished made me realize that the only limits on what we can achieve are the ones we place on ourselves. Her success opened my eyes to possibilities I hadn't even considered." The training and doctrinal changes resulting from Maria's achievement had lasting effects on military sniper programs. Training courses began incorporating more advanced mathematical instruction, expanded environmental analysis, and psychological preparation for extreme pressure situations. The standards for sniper qualification were raised, and selection criteria were refined to identify candidates with the analytical abilities necessary for complex long-range engagements. Colonel Mitchell, who had planned and authorized the historic mission, was promoted and assigned to lead the Army's sniper school at Fort Benning. One of his first initiatives was implementing a curriculum that incorporated lessons learned from Maria's achievement and other recent combat experiences. Staff Sergeant Santos's success demonstrated that we need to think differently about the limits of precision marksmanship, he explained to the school's instructional staff. We're going to train our students to handle challenges that we previously considered impossible. As Maria's deployment in Afghanistan neared its end, she reflected on the changes that had occurred since her arrival 15 months earlier. She had deployed as a newly qualified sniper, hoping to prove herself capable of serving effectively in a combat role. She was returning home as one of the most celebrated marksmen in military history. But the personal costs of her service were significant. The psychological weight of combat, the stress of constant danger, and the burden of taking human life had affected her in ways that were not immediately apparent to outside observers. Like many combat veterans, she would need time and support to process her experiences and adjust to life away from the battlefield. Her final mission in Afghanistan was a routine patrol that seemed almost anticlimactic after the historic engagement that had made her famous. But Maria approached it with the same professionalism and attention to detail that had characterized her entire deployment. She understood that her reputation was built not on a single extraordinary shot, but on consistent excellence in every aspect of her military service. The flight home was bittersweet. Maria was eager to see her family and friends, but she was also leaving behind teammates and a mission that had defined her life for over a year. The camaraderie of combat operations and the intensity of military service created bonds that were difficult to replicate in civilian environments. Her homecoming was emotional and overwhelming. Her parents, who had worried constantly during her deployment, struggled to reconcile the quiet young woman they remembered with the internationally recognized hero who had returned to them. Uncle Ramon, whose early training had started Maria on her path to military service, was particularly proud of her achievements. "Mija, I always knew you had a special gift," he told her during a quiet family dinner. "But what you've accomplished goes far beyond what any of us could have imagined. You've made our entire family proud, and you've shown the world what's possible when talent meets determination." The transition back to garrison duty was challenging for Maria.